Hi, I'm Coralyn Martin,
And I'm Leslie MacNabb.
and we are the co-owners and co-founders of the Recovery Revolution. And what you're about to see is a little snippet from a Q&A that we did in our exclusive 6-month recovery program for partners and families of those who are in need of recovery. So in this Q&A, we talk a little bit about goals and how you can use the goals that you set to anchor yourself in how you establish your boundaries and how you interact with your loved one. So stay tuned for a little bit of exclusive content from a Q&A. And if you want more information about that program, we'll have a link at the end of the video. Bye.
Hey, so Hunter asks how to set or determine what is a healthy boundary for yourself, but also isn't harmful towards the person. And Hunter went into some details about her current situation with her friend and how she had a recent conversation with her that she was not going to buy her shots any longer because that came up every time they were together. And so she's asking about boundaries.
So I think there's a couple of things that we got to ask. I love when people ask questions and then it's like, well, we have a question for your question. I always get so annoyed when someone does that to me if I'm like in a conversation on social media and someone's like, well, what about this? Like, but these are real questions that I think will help clarify the answer. One that Leslie brought up before we jumped on here was, what was the result of the conversation? But because we do need to know a little bit more of like, how did that conversation actually go? Because that can tell you whether or not the boundary you set had a positive or negative effect. And I do want to point out that even if it seems like that person's upset with the boundary, doesn't necessarily mean it has a negative effect. There's a big difference between someone's reaction and the outcomes of your behavior. But to keep in the theme of this week, which is about goal setting and visualizing your future and planning and creating realistic goals that you can achieve. What's your goal? So this is really an important question to ask whenever you're trying to set a boundary, either for yourself, to try to support others. Regardless, if you know what your goal is, even if it's not your like giant goal for your life, like I want to become a news anchor and then I want to be like Oprah, like that's not the goal you need to keep in mind. The goal there is maybe something smaller, like I want this person to know that I care about them, but I also want to express my discomfort. So if you keep your goal in mind, the way you express yourself is going to be so much different. And if you let your goal get shifted, or if you get sidetracked, I know I talk all the time about the crab bucket. If someone gets in your head like, oh, this isn't okay, and they're being this, and we should be upset, if you come at it from that perspective, the way that you communicate is going to reflect that. So if you are from a place of, shaming or like, stop being this way, and then you come to your friend and say, hey, I'm not going to buy you shots anymore because it's a problem. You have a problem and I'm just not going to condone your behavior. That's maybe a healthy boundary at its core, that you don't want to buy them shots, but in the delivery and the communication toward that person, you've now shamed them for something they're struggling with, which does do a bit more harm. It's not a harmless boundary. It's not supporting them. It's what's the word I'm looking for? I don't remember the word I'm looking for. It starts with a D and it's like poo-pooing. Poo-pooing is not the phrase I'm looking for. Don't be like that. Like you don't want to have that energy towards someone. I'm gonna let Leslie talk so I can try to think of this word.
Yeah.
Discouraging.
Discouraging. Yeah. There you go. I just had to start talking. I didn't even have to have anything to say. Yeah, exactly. In terms of relationships, if your goal is to be a good friend, and kind of like Corey was saying, at the core, your goal or your boundary is that, being a good friend. I want to be a good friend by supporting the well-being of my friends. And that that's not supportive of that, then you're meeting your goal of being a good friend and you're setting that boundary for yourself. This is something that I will no longer do and take place in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it reminds me, this question and the answers that we have for it reminds me of something that my best friend's dad said in the other group, and some of you may have heard me say this before, but learning to empower recovery, or learning not to enable anything but recovery. So if your goal is, I want this person to get help, then you line your actions up with what enables them to recovery. And in that case, like, not buying them shots is definitely supporting their recovery, or to give a converse word, disabling their addiction, or at least not enabling it from your perspective. But on the other hand, the way that you deliver it can be enabling their addiction, because things like shaming and making a person feel alienated from their friends, stuff like that, actually fuels someone's vices, or someone's, harmful self-sabotaging behaviors or traumas. It can be re-traumatizing if they have a core wound that's related to abandonment, especially. So being aware of your loved one's situation is important, but then also knowing like what your goal is for them, not taking necessarily into consideration how they feel about it in the moment, because we can't think that someone who's struggling with addiction is going to be happy with us when we say, hey, I'm not going to help it. I'm not going to help you be addicted anymore.
Yeah. I hope this is helpful to you, Hunter. Please follow up with us and let us know, answer our questions so that we can know how to further support you.